our meditation position. Main thing is for meditation is having the, from the sit bones all the way up through the upper body, through to the crown. We want to have this kind of uprightness, sense of uprightness along the spine. Shoulders back. Just feeling a bit grounded or earthed on our cushion. And then maybe a minute just to sit with the breath, either doing the 9-round breathing exercise, if you know that, or just sitting with the process of the breath to settle the mind. And then in your own way, just tuning into your motivation, your intention for coming this evening. What comes up in the mind when we think about our own intention or motivation for coming? So just before we begin the prayers, just last week we talked a little bit, talked about this, what we need, some sort of prerequisites, we call it, for practicing Tantra. One of them I mentioned was this mind or renunciation. Sounds like, again, a difficult word to digest a bit, But what that means really, is like, what are we getting at there with this mind or renunciation? Well, we can say at this point in our lives, we all know that it's quite hard to see our stuff. Some of our stuff, some of our challenges in our mind and our consciousness we can see. But there's quite a lot that's hidden to us. So our friends, family, partners, even Dharma brothers and sisters, they usually let us know what some of your stuff is, yeah? That's what happens in relationships. We bump into each other's stuff. And we probably didn't enter into that motivation with that intention, but anyway, they kindly help us, relationships with others, help us to see some inner challenges or obstacles or blocks. However, even with some of these shortcomings, either we know or others help us to see, like lack of patience, maybe unskillful speech, talking too much, selfish in some aspects of our behaviour, things that people close to us often point out. There are deeper layers of work that needs to be done And this is what we're talking about with the mind of renunciation, going into even deeper layers of work. There are causes for those immediate limitations that we have. They come from a deeper cause, a karma and delusions. So when we approach Tantra, when we enter into tantric practice, really what the first step is, this first principle of the path, renunciation, what that is a kind of determination from our side, a sense of really wanting to emerge from our limitations. These two limitations that limit us, that cause us to harm others. Either verbally, physically, mostly not physically now, but verbally, maybe mentally, And to see and feel those deeper layers of karma and delusions in our own mind as the causes of suffering, taking responsibility, a sense of responsibility for our own stuff. These two aspects that cause us to be, unhappy, challenged and limited right now. So it's this sense of wanting to emerge from these limitations. And simultaneously, when we enter into Tantra, we also try to embrace that we have a much more beautiful nature, our Buddha nature, our Buddha potential. So this is kind of how we pivot into tantric practice, recognizing our kind of concrete, what feel like concrete, solid limitations right now, but embracing the possibility for them to be completely cleansed for the mental continuum and to awaken something more beautiful in ourselves, more profound, more vast, and much more beneficial for ourselves and all sentient beings. And to add into the mix, we do this with this kind of bodhicitta motivation. How wonderful it would be if I and all beings were free from suffering and the causes of suffering, karma and delusions, and really had this momentum, ability, determination to awaken this Buddha nature, this enlightened mind. So it's like we have two sides of the coin. We have to remove our limitations and still acknowledge and embrace and get energy, inspiration from this potential we have to become enlightened, to become awakened. And that's kind of part of the tantric principle, really holding on to that, getting a kind of a courage from that, that we have the possibility to release ourselves from karma and delusion, from all our limitations. So with this kind of motivation, kind of trying to hold that, and this is what we're trying to develop all the time in the Lam Rim, just deepen that motivation to get out of our limitations and to slowly move towards this awakening mind. And Tantra, when we study and practice Tantra, has this ability for this process to go a little bit more quickly, faster. That's the kind of skill of tantric practice. So, and as a basis, we need refuge in Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. We need to have a firm conviction that the Buddha, all the Dharma that the Buddha taught, the teachings, and the spiritual community have the qualities and abilities that we also want to embody. We want that. We want to embrace that. We want to feel that. We want to experience that and become them. That's our inner guru talking. That determination, that wish, that aspiration that becomes slowly more of a determination, more of a focus to become like them. The Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. Unify your mind with your qualities. So let's recite once in Tibetan, twice in English, the refuge prayer, whatever understanding we have of that, whatever you can peel from what I just said now, or maybe your own sense of refuge, wherever you feel with that. But right now, for the purpose of the class, we're taking refuge in the teachings of the Buddha. and each other, the Sangha, each other, with our motivation and wish to kind of move beyond where we are right now. Sangye chodan soge chognam la janchu bardu dagi kyapsu chi dagi chinso gebe sonam ge rola penjir sangye drubar shok. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. And here, just to create a merit, a potential in our mind stream, or potential, we recite what's called a mandala offering, a depiction of a kind of pure land. Or if we're new, we can just imagine offering something mentally, flowers or beautiful food, something we offer, to be able to open up, for our minds to open up and receive the Dharma, the teachings. We need to continually do this practice of offering, offering from our side, that creates a special space in our mind, a special environment for us to be able to absorb the teachings. Saji bogi joshe meto tram rira blingje nye de gyambadi sangye jindu mete uwaye drogen nam dag jina jopar shok. This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine there's a Buddha land and offer it. May all transmigratory beings enjoy this pure land. Yedam Guru Ratna Mandala Gamne Yadayami. Then reciting a few mantras of Shakyamuni Buddha, his name mantra. And as we do that, feeling Shakyamuni in our presence, once our mind's more purified, there's a certain level when our mind's purified that we see around us Buddhas all the time, guiding us, teaching us. And sometimes when we're deeper in our practice, we feel that, we feel the presence when we're deeper in meditation. I think some of us have definitely had that experience, or maybe we feel it ongoing. The deeper our refuge is, the deeper we feel the guidance of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, sort of protecting and blessing our lives, So in this case, we feel from the heart of Shakyamuni Buddha, golden light and nectar coming, filling us and just washing away. So our mind needs a lot of cleansing, It's a big part of the path, cleansing our limitations, Karma and delusion, they need cleansed. So cleansing them and ripening the mind to be able to hear and absorb and gain some sort of insight from the teachings, ideally, whatever it is, because it's really up to our own mind, what we hear, what we receive, what touches us. So just feeling we're cleansed and receiving the blessing of Shakyamuni Buddha, light, golden light, filling us up. Dayada o mene mene maha minaye soha. 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 All right. 1 second, sorry. I dropped my mala. Anyway, so welcome again to the class. Some of you dropped in a little bit later, so welcome, welcome. So we're on week 2, Introduction to Tantra. And let me just pull up what I need to pull up here, and then we can start. Okay, slide number 12, that's where we are. So this week, just to begin with, I mean, mostly we're going to go into how Tantra works, deity yoga this week. But, and actually mostly you will have the screen, I'm mostly going to have the screen up here, so you can see me on the side. I find it too challenging to go in and out of the Zoom, these PowerPoints too much, so I'm not skilled enough for that. So you're mostly going to see me on the side and hear me. Hear me is the most important thing, So this week, we talked a little bit more last week about what Tantra is, and about, as I mentioned in the meditation, what kind of prerequisites, just touching on them, This is what we've studied. For those of you who, some of you have been studying the Lam Rim for a long time. So as a basis of Tantra, we do need to have some background, we need to set the scene of our mind, so to speak, with these 3 principles of the path: renunciation, that I touched on in the meditation. This kind of, some sort of sense of our limitations right now, a sense of that, and understanding kind of what they are, the 2 main causes of suffering that the Buddha taught, that comes from the Four Noble Truths, karma and delusion. Trying to get some sort of idea of the presence of those blocking our mind right now. From the viewpoint of Tantra, so we kind of come into the Buddha, the teachings from two ways, So in the very early days, to give a good example of this, in the very early days at Kopan Monastery, where Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, so again, there's a couple of us who are just joining, and they may not know, but Lama Zopa Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe are the founder of the FPMT organisation, the 2 founders. And Lama Yeshe passed away in the mid-80s, and actually the book that I'm using, one of the books we use for this module is Introduction to Tantra, that was written by Lama Yeshe. And then Lama Zopa Rinpoche ran our organisation, was the spiritual director for 40 years, and passed away a couple of years ago. So in the very early days, when our organisation was just kind of blossoming, starting to come into existence in Nepal, it all started in Nepal. Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I mean, those students were so fortunate. They had those 2 gurus just teaching all the time, because nobody knew Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. They hadn't travelled much in the West, So in the very early days, it was Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche teaching these courses, 10-day courses, and this was in the late 60s, early 70s. And, and I wasn't there at that time either, but I heard, like all the stories, when these students, some of our older students now, our more senior Sangha, who attended those teachings, and they were like completely new as well. Many of them were hippies still at the time, in their 20s. And they said, when Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche taught, they teach like 10-day courses, and of course you're there completely absorbed in the whole course. It was often the case that Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who mainly taught, he would mostly taught, and he would teach what we call the Lam Rim, these topics on renunciation and bodhicitta and emptiness, and a lot at that time on renunciation. Suffering, causes of suffering. So, it was quite heavy for people, because Rinpoche would go into a lot of detail about, well, what is our karma and delusion? What is our problem, in great depth. And then Lama Yeshe would come in and say, we're all enlightened, we're all Buddhas, we can come, so he would come in with a tantric approach, So it was almost like you had Rinpoche coming in with a sutra approach, like really expounding and clarifying the situation we're in right now, the situation of karma and delusion, the situation of being under the control of suffering or dukkha and the causes of suffering, what that looks like, where we are right now. And then Lama would come in with the tantric approach of, well, you can all become deities and Buddhas and you need to visualize yourself. So they were called, I think, the good cop and the bad cop, kind of, I think that's what the students used to say. So in many ways, though, that's how we're approaching the Dharma, So the nice thing about Tantra, it's kind of like almost like the good news, because we're focusing much more, as I mentioned last week, on this Buddha nature that we all have, this potential for enlightenment. We're trying to bring that out in the tantric practices, but not at the expense of neglecting the sutra, right? We need to be very aware of what our limitations are right now, We need to be aware of them, and we need to develop this kind of wish. We need to feel them. We need to feel the evolution of our own
Oh, here she
suffering.
is.
Oh, sorry. Can someone turn their volume off? Somebody's got their volume up. I can't see who it is. Uh, oh, here we go. No, no. Someone has their volume on. Maybe they've taken it off now, yeah. So this is very much how we have to keep pivoting back and forward, We need to be aware that I think we're all aware that we're limited right now. That's why we're here. But how much that is, and how much we're kind of, in a sense, imprisoned by that right now, But not to kind of feel like this is who I am and this is who I can only be. The tantric approach is kind of moving out of that in a more swift way, Connecting with these kind of aspects of ourselves that are at the moment hidden, our clear light, continuous pure nature that's just hidden, temporarily covered by these two main causes of suffering, karma and delusion. So that's just like always trying to have both of those approaches. So when we feel down about ourselves, we're feeling like discouraged and suffering's too much, read some Tantra, get inspired by Lama Yeshe's book and the introduction. So it's very inspiring, it picks the mind up. This is what I can become. And then when the mind's like maybe overly distracted, overly excited, overly attached to things, then it's actually very good to do some like sutra practice, thinking about the faults of attachment and just bringing the mind a little bit back down to normal, So we need to, it's like, that's why I mentioned last week, where we want to go eventually, where Tibetan Buddhist practice is blending the Sutra and Tantra paths, and that's the skill and the beauty of this tradition, that we blend both together. It just takes a while to wrap our head around all the aspects, So we need to be patient in that respect. Okay, so just before we go into a wee bit more like what Tantra is, I just want to finish covering some of this, and that's what I'm touching on right now. Sutra refers specifically, so when we're talking a little bit about, again, as I'm talking about here, the difference between Sutra and Tantra, Sutra is what we call the common or causal path. So we can see it refers specifically to the teachings that the Buddha intended for a general audience of spiritual practitioners, for everybody, basically, They're for everyone. So we can see even how Buddhism is spread throughout the world. You've got different countries that uphold different vehicles. We have so we have the Hinayana vehicle in Buddhism. That's for a general audience, teaching the Four Noble Truths, as a basis. The Four Noble Truths. So in Thailand, that's predominantly taught, the path to liberation, individual liberation. That's upheld there. I think Cambodia as well. So there's, these other countries that mostly, and of course, even within this, as I say, we have to practice Sutra and Tantra together. Ideally, that's the goal. We want to practice both in this tradition. So Sutra's practiced in all the traditions in all the countries, because that's for a general audience of practitioners. We need to, as a basis of our path, basically everybody, the goal is to liberate ourselves, liberate us from this load of karma and delusion, understand what that is, how that's functioning and operating in our mind right now, and understanding the path, the true path, and the truth of cessation, the next two truths that the Buddha taught, free from that, that's the Dharma that the Buddha taught, the cessation of suffering and the true path. So that's common to everyone, that's common to all the Buddhist countries practice the Sutra path. And that's for a big general audience, and we all need that as a basis of our practice. So the Tantric path, Tantra's viewed as uncommon or resultant path. So Tantra teachings are also discourses of the Buddha, but these teachings are of more of an advanced nature than those referred to as Sutra. Tantra uses a more direct yet more complex set of techniques to achieve the same goal in a single lifetime. So again, when I mention vehicles, we have the Hinayana vehicle, the Mahayana vehicle, Mahayana, which is the great vehicle, and the Vajrayana. So tantric, what we say call in terms of Tantra, the vehicle of Tantra is called the Vajrayana, the diamond or indestructible. Vajra means like diamond, indestructible vehicle, but it can also be referred, you might hear the term Mantrayana. That is the same vehicle of teachings, like tantric teachings, or sometimes it's called secret mantra. So these are all the same name, it's not something different. You just, sometimes they're expressed in different ways, but they are all the same vehicle. Okay, so anything else I wanted to say? Okay, so we'll see a little bit later why it mentions here the tantric teachings are taught to a more select audience. But just now, just again as a Teresa, do you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, that was hard to unmute. It says esoteric teachings. Do you see under the middle Tantra
Yes,
part in parentheses? Is that referring to Sutra or Tantra?
that's actually Tantra. Exo means outward,
Yeah, yeah,
Esoteric means more sort of inward. So yeah, that's referring to Tantra, and
I thought so.
exoteric. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, just to give us an evolution of, how Tantra came about, how Tantric teachings were taught. So like Sutra was taught to a general audience. I mean, we know all the sutras, the Buddhas taught 84,000 sets of teachings. He went around India and, walked around India for 50 years, over 40, 45, 50 years, and taught to general audiences. But the way that Tantric teachings were taught was quite different. And they're a bit more of a kind of secret or more limited audience. And according to the Vajrayana lineages, as it said, the Buddha he did teach it during his lifetime, but not so much publicly, He, and again, this is where we get into the esoteric side, the more mystical side. He would appear in different aspects, like in different bodies, like more subtle bodies. Nirmanakaya, Sambhogakaya. I'm going to mention a little bit later on what those bodies are. Some of us know already. But basically, Nirmanakaya means like a manifestation or emanation body, and Sambhogakaya is called an enjoyment body. So like we see in the image here, teaching and like the aspect of the Buddha, the tantric Buddha that you're going to achieve through that practice. So you actually arose as like, if he's going to teach like the Guru Samaja, Vajrayana, Vajradhara teachings, he would arise in those deities and teach those beings. So there was examples when he taught like that. And they were often taught in sort of to highly realised bodhisattvas and adepts, to deities in pure realms or practitioners with karmic connection to understand them. So this is why you often sometimes in some other countries, in Buddhist countries, they don't always accept the Vajrayana tradition, because it was taught in this esoteric hidden way. So it's not always accepted in other traditions because of that, you need a certain karma and merit to hear at that time. You needed a merit and capacity to be able to hear and receive the teachings. So I wanted to tell the story of King Indrabhuti, So this is one example of how the teachings were taught. So he was a king, and he was actually, from the sort of the tantric literature, King Indrabhuti was the ruler of Odiyana, which was a region associated with early sort of Vajrayana practices. Kind of in the Swat Valley, which is around kind of like Pakistan, something like that now, northern India. He was a powerful king, very intelligent and devoted, had a very devotional nature. And so I'm not completely sure if this was taught during the time when the Buddha, King Indrabhuti was alive during the time of the Buddha, but basically it was close around the time when the Buddha was living. And he had this, a very sincere wish to practice Dharma. you know. But he couldn't renounce. He had a kingdom, he had family, he had royal duties, and he realised, you know, unlike the Buddha who showed the aspect of leaving the kingdom and everything, he was in a position where he didn't feel he could do that, you know, but yet he had this incredible deep aspiration to practice Dharma, you know. So, and he lived around sense pleasures, power, responsibility. And, you know, so for him, obviously the sutra-based approach of sort of like, as all the monastics at the time of the Buddha did, giving up this life and following the Buddha and practicing in monasteries or, you know, wild places, you know, he wasn't going to be able to do that. So he kind of thought, well, how can I achieve enlightenment without abandoning my life in this world? So according to the Vajrayana literature, he was in a position to request the Buddha directly. You know, so again, I'm not sure exactly the timeline around this, because this is where it gets a bit more esoteric with the, you know, the Vajrayana literature. But nonetheless, the Buddha appeared to him out of his kind of devotion and wish to practice, you know, and he asked the Buddha, you know, how can I achieve full enlightenment without abandoning my life in this world? And that was kind of the condition for Tantra to start being taught, you know. This was the condition due to the merit, the karma of this king, and Indra requesting the Buddha directly. He revealed one of the tantric teachings, one of the tantric path called, what the path is called, the path of Guru Samaja. And he was able, and that enabled through the practice of Tantra. It doesn't mean that he didn't have renunciation, the king. It doesn't mean that he didn't understand the nature of delusion, but he had this kind of, you know, real wish to benefit sentient beings. He wanted to achieve enlightenment, and so within the context of his life, the Buddha gave him permission and taught these tantric practices, so he could still achieve enlightenment in the context of being in that kingdom and having that life, right? So that's kind of where Tantra's coming from, you know. It's like, of course, there are great yogis and everyone who really completely abandoned this life, became hermits. But the good news, in a way, I guess, about Tantra is that it's possible, and it should be especially inspiring for many Westerners. You know, you're not going to become monastics. We can practice Tantra in our life, in the context of our life, you know, because of the skillful methods of Tantra. So you still have to have the backdrop of renunciation, bodhicitta, and the wisdom, again, this kind of understanding of emptiness. We still have to have these, but that can still be practiced without sort of giving up the external affairs of this life, you know. So this is kind of where Tantra came from, you know, working with kind of like, we can still work on this kind of sense of this resultant path, you know, how that manifested through the life story, especially so through some of the stories how the Buddha taught Tantra, the way it was taught. So how is Tantra different from Sutra? So the tantric approach to solving problems, so again, as you saw maybe in the previous slide, the causal vehicle, you know, it's different. We have the causal vehicle of practicing sutra, where we're trying to kind of get out, we're trying to chip away at the delusions, you know, like we have to kind of practice renunciation, be more austere, give up this life, you know, focusing a little bit more on the problem, yeah? The two noble truths, the suffering and the causes of suffering, and creating the causes to get out of that problem. So we're coming more from that perspective. Whereas the resultant vehicle, which is what Tantra's called, as it says here, as Lama Yeshe says in Introduction to Tantra, although tantric practitioners, they don't neglect creating the same causes as the followers of Sutra. What does that mean? Developing a determination to get out of samsara, having a bodhicitta motivation that you want to awaken for all sentient beings, and having at least some idea of emptiness, what that means, the nature of mind, consciousness. But with that, they take the future result of full spiritual revolution as a very starting point of their path. Right, so what I'm saying is here, as what the good cop, bad cop, Lama Yeshe and Rinpoche, we're trying to like focus from the very beginning on the goal, on the kind of taking that result as part of the path. So, before we go into and that means really practicing something called deity yoga, emptiness yoga, which I'm going to explain. That's what we're going to go into for the rest of the class. But before we do that, I just want to cover again, a couple of other differences with Sutra and Tantra. So the first one is, it's called the resultant vehicle. And what we mean by that, we're going to go into soon. We're taking the result, this kind of the good cop part of it, I can achieve enlightenment, and bringing into our being this kind of quality enlightenment already. And there's a difference in Sutra also in the method. So in the method of Tantra, what we're trying to do is access, as I mentioned last week, these kind of ancient parts of ourselves, accessing our subtle consciousnesses. So we have a gross consciousness, we have subtle consciousness, and we have a very subtle consciousness. So in daily life, we're mostly functioning on a gross sensual level, gross senses, through our five sense doors. And even in the level of mental consciousness, it's often more on a kind of grosser level. We're really kind of identifying with the delusions that are present in the grosser level of consciousness. We kind of strongly identify with them. We strongly identify with the concrete nature of thoughts, so that's generally how we're functioning, When we sleep, we go into a little bit more subtle consciousness, yeah? So there's still an I, we're still doing things. Some of us might be sleeping and just zonked out, But, still we're in we can say we're in a subtler place, The sense consciousnesses of kind of temporarily absorbed, not completely, but they're sleeping, literally, And what wakes up at the dream time is a more subtle consciousness. And that's our dream consciousness. That's one example of your dream consciousness. And ideally, when we meditate, we're trying to kind of move out of the realm of the gross consciousnesses and trying to get a bit more subtle, yeah? That's what we feel. We're trying to go into subtle, because actually they're more powerful. The more subtle we can go into our layers of consciousness, to the very subtle consciousness, that's our Buddha nature. That's our potential there for enlightenment. And that's what we're trying to access in Tantra. The subtle we're trying to utilize subtle and very subtle level of consciousness. Ideally, if you're able to remember your dreams, be aware, not remember, but be aware in your dreams, you can use that to meditate, That's kind of coming more for the tantric teachings, dream yoga. And then when we get into a little bit more complex tantric practices in the realm of high yoga tantra, what we're trying to do is access this very subtle consciousness, this mind of clear light. But either way, whether we're doing, sort of preliminary tantric practice or more evolved, the idea is to kind of wake up these subtle levels of consciousness, because they're more in the nature of wisdom. They're primordially who we are, how we exist. They're clean, clear, they're pure, they're free from the contaminations. The most subtle one, the very subtle one, that's the one that's free from the contaminations of karma and delusion. So we want to bring that out, We want to awaken that, wake that up, So this is what Tantra is doing. It's like getting that to become present now, instead of sleeping all the time, because we're so involved in the gross senses. So that's a little bit different in the method of Sutra and Tantra, Sutra is more like using the analytical mind to subdue and pacify the mind, and refraining from this, that, the next thing, which is, we need to do that too, refraining from negativities and actions. But Tantra is like trying to wake up these, it's coming from the other side, a different angle, So ideally, we want to come from all angles in our spiritual practice, So the other difference, and I'm going to talk about these three levels of consciousness a little bit more as well, but the other difference is that, again, will come more in the last class, because we're moving into the realm. Certainly, when we go into, there's different classes of Tantra, which I'll cover in this classes too. But we also need for tantric practice a greater faith in the guru and the practices. You know, we need a certain, I don't know if it's greater, but we need a certain type of faith, you know, in the spiritual teacher, a conviction, a trust, a kind of real, you know, it's something that needs to develop over time, the connection with the spiritual teacher. So that we rely on. The more we practice Tantra, the more we have to kind of rely on a spiritual teacher. You know, we need to get initiations and commentaries and advice. And so, that, you know, as we go deeper into Tantric practice, that becomes more pertinent. You know, we need to do that. But at the beginning level of Tantra, even we can, the nice thing about Tantra is we can test it out before taking initiations. You know, there's Tantra, you know, Tara practice, medicine Buddha, there's certain tantric practices, quite fortunately, for most of us, we can do before entering into a sort of commitments and, you know, relationships with gurus before we take initiations. But we do need to rely on them as we go deeper into tantric practices. So any questions with that so far before I go into questions, comments? Before I go into the next slide, which is kind of like really going into what deity yoga is, you know, how we practice Tantra, what that is. Has anyone got anything they're not sure of or anything they want to ask? Okay. So what I want to ask before we go in, because some of us, you know, some of us have done quite, you know, at least one or two tantric retreats. And of course, you can do simple tantric retreats like a weekend on Tara practice or medicine Buddha. And there's also retreats you can do where we count mantras, you know, certain hundreds of thousands of mantras. And that's called a nearing retreat. And that's a bit more serious when we do that. And we need an initiation to do that, you know. So some of us have done some have been practicing for some time. So I want to ask some of those, some of you. So when we do tantric practice, is the end goal the same? I'm going to stop the share here for a minute. Anyone want to be brave enough to answer? I see you, Teresa.
Can you ask that question again? I didn't quite hear it, I don't think.
Is the goal in sutra, when you practice just sutra, you know, or you practice what we call in this tradition sutra and tantra, is the goal the same?
I don't know. It's a good question. I've never actually asked myself that. I think the goal is the same. I just want to wake up.
Yes, well, you're right. You know, I mean, of course, there's different vehicles of Buddhism, you know. So in the Hinayana vehicle, Theravadan teachings, the goal is individual liberation, right? And then, but when you practice the Mahayana vehicle, yeah, the great vehicle, the goal is enlightenment. Right? So when you practice what we call the Vajrayana or secret mantrayana, which is really in this tradition Sutra and Tantra together, we're practicing all three vehicles together. The goal is still the same, enlightenment. So there's no difference, because we're talking about the difference between Sutra and Tantra. So just so we're really clear, unless of course you're mainly practicing the Hinayana teaching Theravadan approach, you're aiming for self liberation. But for Mahayana practitioners, whether you're Mahayana practitioner or you're practicing also in connection with Vajrayana, you're using Vajrayana tantric practice, the goal, all practitioners are aiming for enlightenment, right? So just so we're clear on that. What is the difference then between simply practicing Mahayana and not including, you know, not practicing alongside the Tantrayana teachings? Where does the difference lie? Or what makes the Vajrayana, why would we practice Vajrayana when we can get enlightened? We're practicing the great vehicle, Mahayana vehicle. Why would we practice Tantra? What would be the reason? Yes, Kim?
It's faster.
Yes. So that's why it's a faster approach, you know. And again, as Lama Yeshe would say, well, that works for Westerners, you know. think I mentioned that in the first class, instant enlightenment. So it's faster. It's not quite instant, but because of the methods, it lies in the method, not the method of how we practice, the skill of tantric practice. So it's lying in that. And again, we're going to cover that more. So again, there's two aspects of the path. There's this, we want to develop bodhicitta, to its highest level, to this skill and ability, and that's the method side of the path. We want to develop that as much as possible to become enlightened for all sentient beings. And also there's the other side of the path, the wisdom, wisdom realizing emptiness. To fully benefit others, we need to be completely, we need to know our own nature, we need to have complete fulfillment of the wisdom side of the path, so wisdom realizing emptiness. So that's the goal. Is the emptiness that we realize in sutra when they finish the sutra path, is that the same as the emptiness that we realize in tantra? I see Eloise shaking her head. Yes, Eloise?
Okay. I would say yes.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the difference lies in, you're right, there's a slight difference, and it's to do with the method, So yes, the emptiness that is realised in Tantra is the same as in Sutra, it's just the mind realising it is much subtler.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no difference in regard to the wisdom. So this is what I'm talking about when we get into kind of more like the level of high Yoga Tantra. We're trying to access these subtle levels of consciousness in Tantra. We're trying to utilize them, and because we're trying to access them, because once you're in more subtler states, it's much easier to recognize its nature, rather than doing so much analysis and this and using concepts and do it, which we have to do in Sutra. There's a lot of analysis and concepts, and we have to keep breaking down the concepts so they become more subtle, more clear. So Tantra is more this kind of direct approach of going right into our, as much as we can, go more and more subtle into this more subtle level of consciousness, because there it's like we're already free from a lot of the concrete aspects of ourselves, like how we feel about ourselves, Once we go more subtle, it's almost like they're more powerful, the states of mind, and it's much more easy for us to identify with them once we're there. They're much more subtle minds are much more powerful than our concrete concepts. So we want to get to that's the idea of Tantra, is kind of trying to access those. So just, in a nutshell, that's a little bit the difference between Sutra and Tantra. But yes, the emptiness, the enlightenment, that's all the same that we realise. It's just it's the method. It's the method side of the path that differs, So I'll just put up the PowerPoint again. So here now, there's so many bits on the screen, so it takes me a while. So the tantric approach to solving problems, so going into this a little bit more. This technique or method, again, you'll hear this a lot in Tantra, like the method side of the path, focusing on the method side that's different in Tantra from Sutra, this method side. Wisdom's the same. The method to realise the wisdom, to awaken bodhicitta, is different. Involves what we call deity yoga, cultivating the view of ourselves as a meditational deity, a fully enlightened being, kind of like from the very beginning, So that's what we're trying to access, familiarise ourselves with that from the very beginning. Let me just look at my notes. It's, we say, what's meditation? The meaning, even the word gom, what does gom mean? It means, in Tibetan, the Tibetan word for meditation is gom, many of us know that. And actually when you translate it, it doesn't translate as meditation, the Tibetan word, it translates as becoming familiar. So what we're doing here, the sort of basis of tantric practice is familiarizing ourselves from the very beginning with the qualities, the kind of the appearance of the deity, the Buddha. And we know in Tibetan Buddhism there's many tantric deities, you know. I mean, the basic ones that we know are like Tara, Medicine Buddha for healing, Chenrezig for developing compassion. You know, they're all Buddhas, but they have a particular quality that they embody, a certain quality that they help us to embody. You know, so again, it's like, it's similar, you know, as we do in Sutra, but in Tantra, we're familiarizing ourselves. It's coming from this place, from the beginning, familiarizing ourselves with who we want to become closer to our end goal, to become a Buddha, to become fully awake, as Teresa said, to become fully enlightenment. We're bringing that into our experience. We're trying to visualize, imagine, trying to embody the experience of that deity, that fully enlightened being from the very beginning. And it's a skillful way when we do these kind of visualization processes, reciting the mantra of the deity, making offerings. There's different methods we use in that approach. There's a skillful way where it wakens out, it wakes up this sort of fundamental purity of our mind by identifying with who we really are, in a sense, you know. It's just not fully developed. And it's a bit like a fake it till you make it approach, yeah? I mean, we've heard that saying before, you know, fake it till you make it, you know. This is kind of like, if we want to just, some catchphrase so it doesn't become too complicated, that's kind of the essence of what we're trying to do with deity yoga. Cultivate the view of ourselves as a fully enlightened being already. So that's kind of the essence. You know, of course, it's all easier said than done, but just getting a sense of that right now. So next slide, again, and just again to go into, you know, what does deity mean? You know, it's a new word for us. We don't always use that term. Some of us might, but what do we mean here? A tantric deity, sometimes they use the word expression yidam. Well, in some sense, here where it is a symbolic expression of enlightenment, a manifestation. It's not really symbolic, but I don't know. Anyway, it is an expression of an enlightened nature in the form, in that kind of more physical form. A manifestation of compassion, wisdom and power. What the deity is, that's the embodiment of our mind, how we want it, how we can appear, how we can manifest when our mind is fully awake. It's full. To its full capacity, we've developed compassion, wisdom and power. These are the three qualities of a Buddha. You know, a Buddha has compassion fully developed. There's no more, you know, there's all these paths that you traverse in the Buddhist tradition, path of seeing and meditation, and the last one, there's 5 paths, but the last one, when you've traversed those 4 paths, the last one is a path of no more learning. There's nothing more for you to learn. There's nothing more for you to accomplish, to embody, to be with your mind, you know. So that's what we call a Buddha, you know. He's achieved the path of no more learning. And what that is you're fully embodied your compassion, you're fully embodied in your wisdom, and you're fully embodied in your power and ability to benefit sentient beings, you know. That power's complete in you. And what a deity is also, it's a mirroring of your own Buddha nature, what it's going to become when you have those 3 qualities fully embodied. It's a mirror, it's an aspect of what you're moving but toward. It's your journey you're going to take to awaken and develop your Buddha nature. You know, you're moving in the journey to become that being. And that's often why, you know, when we meet Tantra, there's different deities, because all the you know, Tara is fully enlightened. You know, the aspect of Tara, that deity. Chenrezig, the Buddha of compassion, is fully enlightened. You know, all these deities have all these qualities, but you know, often when we start in the teachings, we find that I feel I have connection with Tara more. When I recite Tantra, how do we enter into Tantra? We just start reciting some of these mantras. We maybe go to some meditations people are leading, and we start to feel, well, I feel more a connection with Tara or Medicine Buddha or Chenrezig. And, so what that means is, that particular aspect with the, Chenrezig can have sometimes 4 arms, 2 arms, 1,000 arms. But something in you, with the way that Buddha appears, that aspect, that appearance, or with Tara, with the green body and the, the certain mudras, and so something with that resonates with you more deeply, like that connects and wakens up in you that Buddha nature, that expression, as it says here, that expression enlightenment, that body enlightenment. Something's that helps you to waken up your Buddha nature, to waken up these qualities of compassion, wisdom, and power in you, by visualizing, by even seeing, either visualizing yourself as Tara, visualizing Tara out there, but something with that appearance, psychologically, neurologically, I don't know, something in that is working in you to help to waken up that within you. As I say, it's a mirror of your Buddha nature. Yidam, as I say, deity, it can be deity, or yidam can be done to kind of expressed 2 ways. Yidam is the Tibetan word, deity is the Sanskrit word, that which the mind is bound to. So it's a little bit more, we tend to talk about yidams maybe a little bit more in high Yoga Tantra. There's different classes of Tantra, which I'll talk about probably next week or the week after. So sometimes we have the fortune, if we have a guru or a teacher, they can tell us which deities. Sometimes we figure it out ourselves, sometimes we don't. So sometimes they can, guide us into which deities or yidam we're going to have. We feel like, it's going to help us by visualizing out there ourselves to awaken up this Buddha nature, once we have more of a, what we call karmic connection towards. And of course, the yidam practice really comes into that feeling a sacred commitment in the mind. That comes more into practice when we take initiations. When we take an initiation, it's like we take from a lama, we take a commitment to visualize ourselves, depending on what level of initiation. But at some point, we can take a commitment to visualize ourselves as that deity, to be bound by that, to hold that as our path, This is the aspect of the deity, the quality of the deity, the feeling of the deity, the appearance of the deity. That's the one somehow I have a psychological, spiritual, emotional connection with, and that's the one I'm going to be bound by. I'm going to hold that visualization of me, that identity of me with that deity. So when we take an initiation, it's kind of like that. We're taking a commitment to gradually become more, you could say, intimate with the qualities of those deities, become closer to the qualities of that deity. That's your commitment. And that, again, that comes in more when we take initiations. So those of us who don't, we don't have to worry about that right now, Yoga. So again, this is what we're practicing in tantric practice. The main practice is deity yoga, So deity, yidam, I just explained a little bit. Yoga, well, yoga, we mean it's like unifying our mind with the qualities of the deity. We're yoking our mind. Union of method and wisdom. That's what Tantra is. We're using these 2 principles, these 2 aspects. We want to blend these 2 aspects into our mind. Method meaning compassion side of the path. The skill, not just compassion, but on top of your compassion for sentient beings, we want to develop certain skills and abilities to reach sentient beings, We might feel compassionate for others, but they might not want, Then we need a lot of skill to be able to reach them, to pull them out of, like, their suffering as well, karma delusion. So here we're kind of yoking these 2 qualities in Tantra together, the union of appearance and emptiness. So again, for those of us who are new, don't worry too much about some of this. It's just, we can at least think unifying the mind. We're trying to bring our mind closer to the qualities of wisdom and compassion by using a deity practice, Those of us who are more been practicing it for a while, we have to keep reminding ourselves this is what we're doing in our practice. What am I doing when I'm sitting doing my commitments? I'm trying to unify method and wisdom together. That's the skill, the speed of tantric practice, because generally when we practice sutra, you can only meditate, you go through the Lam Rim. So you do a meditation on maybe, bodhicitta, the 6, there's these, or the 4 immeasurables, we could say, okay, I'm going to sit down and meditate on bodhicitta, I'm going to do that. Or I'm going to sit down and do a real meditation on emptiness, But we see in sutra, you can't do, when you go through the Lam Rim, you can't meditate on both together, not with one mind. You can either say, I'm going to meditate on bodhicitta, but then you shift your mind to meditate on wisdom maybe after a while. So the beauty of tantric practice is that you can meditate on both of these together. It's a skill, which again we'll go into more. But we're meditating in them at the same time, and that's what makes the path faster. Visualizing yourself as a deity and using your wisdom, realizing emptiness to identify with that deity and the qualities. Something in that method makes the path very fast because you're meditating with both wings. We need 2 wings to get enlightenment, compassion and wisdom, or method and wisdom. So in Tantra, you can meditate on both together. Right? So Sutra, you can only do one at a time. And that's what makes the path longer. The Mahayana path, Sutra Mahayana path, longer. You can't do both together. So you have to do one at one time and one at the other. So it just takes longer till the both of them are unified in your mind. But if you can do both at the same time, I mean, wow, that's really great, And again, the practitioner is yoking their present mind to the result, Buddhahood, by practicing as if they're already enlightened. So that's kind of the basis again. Really identifying with this image, this quality, this appearance of the deity. There's a kind of like identifying with that strongly in the practice. So we're on slide 19. Oh no, sorry. Let's go to, I just want to check if there's anything else I wanted to say about that. Yeah, I mean, what Lama says in his book, Lama Yeshe, is it's kind of like, it's a little bit like role-playing in the beginning, Because we can't just say, okay, here I am, Tara, that's what this is. I'm Tara, and, it's a bit artificial, right, in the beginning, so there's no question it is, and that's okay, though. But the more we understand how to practice Tantra, the more we develop the 3 principles of the path, then and we keep practicing that deity through the mantra recitation. It's not like we just visualize the deity and that's it. The sadhanas, the tantric practices have other aspects to them. So it is a little bit like rehearsing for enlightenment, or being like, an actor, so to speak. We might feel like that in the beginning. We're sort of acting out or role playing. But the thing is, in some level, once we start to understand the qualities of that deity, and we start to see like maybe that deity is somebody we really want to become. We want to embody this particular qualities, even though all the deities, all the Buddhas are enlightened. But different deities have different specific qualities, how they benefit others, how they look, how they appear. So it's like, obviously we want to feel inspired by the qualities that deity embodies, that's one part of it. And it's almost like being inspired for anything in our life, we get inspired to want to do many things, so like that, we want to get inspired to embody the qualities of that deity. It's like that deity becomes our favourite person. We want to become like them, embody all their qualities. And it's like we want to start binding ourselves, this kind of sense of yudam, or binding our commitment, binding ourselves, slowly becoming closer through the sadhana practice to the qualities of that deity, that being. And that's again why it's called the result path, because we're trying to just feel and get a presence and a sense of that deity is already with us in some capacities. We already have the experience of that deity in there somewhere in our being, and we want to bring that out more and more. And a very fast way to do it is just kind of constantly trying to identify, imagine, feel that we are this being, of course, it's not just the imagination. We've got mantras to recite, offerings to make. There's other things we need to do as part of the practice. But it's kind of like this kind of little bit role-playing in the beginning, calling upon the powers of the imagination, but trying to really more and more get into that. Right, so any questions, comments? Yes, Teresa.
I could make a quick comment. I started referring to my Yiram as my best friend. I think that's a very Western way to say my best friend. And somehow that really shifted things for me because we think of our best friend as someone that we know really well, we really trust. I like that word yoked. You're yoked with. Anyway, that's my comment.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's good to know because it's very helpful to share because, as I say, some of us have been practicing for a while and we need to get intimate with that quality, best friends, we're intimate with them, yeah? If you say somebody's your bestie, then you have a lot of closeness with that person, with that being. So like that, we don't want to feel, it does feel like, maybe in the beginning the deity's a bit separate from us. But the more we do the practice, and especially once we get the initiation, what does an initiation do? It wakes up. We receive an initiation from a qualified being, somebody who's already deeply embodied in that practice, a guru, a master. So they have the ability, to initiate us, to wake up our subtle energies, our subtle wind, mind, drops, these things, our subtle body. We have a gross body, subtle body. So we have, so they wake that up in us, and it's our job to kind of keep waking that up after that, doing the practices, doing the commitments, yoking our mind. When you do a tantric retreat, you recite typically. If you decide that you want to do a retreat of your deity, the first level of tantric retreat you would do would be to recite 100,000 of that mantra, which many of us know, And what's that retreat called? It's called a nearing retreat, because you're trying to become near or close. Sometimes it's called an approximation retreat. And again, I think for us Westerners, maybe that just seems a bit technical, I'm going to do an approximation. It's like, what does that really mean, And what it means is, I think nearing's softer, nearing's nicer, but I think it's like, as Teresa said, I want to become more friendly with that deity, more close, I want to feel within me those qualities more, I want to awaken those qualities. Like just when you're trying to make friends with anybody, you check out who they are, and so it's like that. We have to build this friendliness with ourselves, with our practice. Yes, we have many karmic limitations. That's true. And the more you practice, it's like you see that, But the seeing of it is the liberation. The seeing of your stuff, isn't it? Not so much somebody telling you, as I said in the meditation, oh, you're really angry or you're quite selfish. That's hard, It's better when we see it ourselves. And we have our own space to work with it, But so the other very nice thing from my experience, I think others probably should share too. The lovely thing about when you do tantric practice, even at the very beginning, when you don't have initiations, but maybe you do some tara, or you join in some pujas or whatever, at the centres, you just start doing some mantra, or what you find is that because of the power of the mantras, the visualizations, even you're not visualizing yourself as a deity, but maybe the deity's out there, in the space before you, it starts to create a space, a kind of Over time, I think it really creates a space in your mind, where you feel like you can start to work with your stuff. This is the other beauty of Tantra. I think the more you do the tantric practices, because it's awakening our goodness. It's a way, we're starting to identify. Well, I do have all this concrete, difficult stuff, but by continually identifying with our innate goodness, waking up the qualities and activating the qualities of the more subtle, pure parts of yourself, we can start to identify with them more, and in that light, still see our stuff, but be chipping away more easily at the stuff, making the stuff more manageable, our anger more manageable, our selfishness more manageable, because we're waking up the vigor, the natural vigor that our mind has, the natural capacity we have to feel compassion for others, to feel kindness, a natural capacity to awaken our wisdom nature. That's what the tantric practices are doing. And that's why we actually, for most of us, we need both. Because if we just keep focusing on the sutra, well, we've got the truth of suffering and the truth of the causes. That's true. But we might get downhearted. Feel like it's all just impossible and hopeless. I think as Westerners, sometimes we can feel like that, yeah? A little bit discouraged with all the kind of the teachings on suffering and the causes of suffering. So we need something that's kind of lighting up the mind, illuminating the mind. And this is where I think tantric practice really comes in, especially like at, maybe at our levels, there's much more evolved and detailed. This is an introduction to Tantra, yeah? There's much more complex and detailed visualizations and, when you're getting more and more into, developing concentration and, it gets much more detailed, but just as a very, in the very beginning, or just complementing our Lamrim practice with a tantric deity, Tara, Medicine Buddha, or of course if we have High Yoga Tantra, it's kind of like we really need that. I think we really do. We need both to help us to see, to move through our concrete concepts, of who we are. Which is, I'm going to go. Does anyone else want to share anything about like how Tantra maybe has helped them? I know some of the ladies in Pamtingpa group have definitely been doing some practices for a while, tantric practices. Are you feeling inspired to share a little bit, maybe how they've helped you? Mary, yes. Or not, maybe they haven't helped you, whatever.
I was just going to say that what's interesting to me is when you talk about working on your stuff and the differences between coming at it from different angles. Yeah. Because you still have the same habits and things that you have to work on. But I think maybe having that reminder of what the pure essence of being a little better than that could be inspiring. Because there's work on both ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. I think we talked about that when I was in Pamtingpa the last time, because I think for us as well, this word of renunciation is not easy, It's not an easy one. And, because we do need that to practice Tantra, right? We need the renunciation, bodhicitta, wisdom, realize it. We need some of that, But Tantra can help to develop that, right? What does renunciation really mean? Actually, it's a great vigour and joy to get enlightened. That's what renunciation, in its really best sense, is. It's like this, wow, being aware of your limitations and but I think, without the tantric practices or some basic Tantra practices, I'm not saying completely, because we all have different dispositions. Some people don't have so much a disposition for Tantra, so they find other ways to create this space and this enthusiasm in the mind, But generally, for us who are practicing this tradition, trying to blend Sutra and Tantra, through the tantric practices, focusing on this enlightened nature, waking that up, then we start to feel like, wow, this is so joyful, and actually that samsara stuff isn't. It's a bit like that, We actually want to, and what really inspired me, because of course I don't have perfect renunciation by any means, I have some insights into it, you know. But I remember when I was in France some years ago, Lama Zoparim, she was leading a retreat there, actually a tantric retreat, and he asked different senior students, and there was a geshe who lives there, to share a little bit something of their, experience or something. And this geshe said, when I think about renunciation, I feel joy. And I was like, wow, interesting. And I think that is correct, That is actually what renunciation is. It's starting to chip it, starting to feel what our mind is like without the delusions. What we can experience when the delusions are at the level of renunciation, they're not completely gone, right? But what we can feel, what joy, because we know the Buddhas feel, when we were in Lama Zoparimshi's presence, when we're in the presence of great beings, we all get lit up, we feel our mind like lighting up, we feel a brightness, we feel a happiness. I mean, that's just emanating from them, never mind what's going on for them. We get a taste of what's going on for them. So I think it doesn't mean that we don't go through hardship in the path, because we need to go through our stuff to get to that joy. But I think in many sense that the ultimate expression of renunciation, the deepest expression that it is like this, starting to really like get some joy of practice, joy that's coming from the wisdom in the bodhicitta, what that means. So I think that's really ultimately in a level, and then through that you have the joyous effort to keep going on. You've got a taste of the joy, and it's like, well, I need to get more of this, but not the truly existent I, That's the thing, But I think there's a natural joy that we can all experience, and I think renunciation is just this, it's like a start of that, That's my sense, So I think it's just, we haven't really come up with another word, apart from sort of emerging, this sense of emerging from dissatisfaction. I like that, how Lama Yeshe explains it. We need to pull ourselves out of that, literally pulling ourselves out of, which I'm going to go into next, pulling ourselves out, overthrowing the tyranny, this is how Lama explains it, of ordinary appearances. Cutting through the veil of ordinary appearance and ordinary grasping. So that's kind of what we are dealing with in Tantra. Why is it good that we visualize ourselves as a deity? The deity is fully joy and love and compassion and power and all these beautiful things. That's not me right now, but we want to awaken those capacities in us and chip away at what that does, that practice does on some deep psychological, spiritual, emotional level, is it's chipping away at how we ordinarily perceive ourselves, me, myself, and I. This concrete, it's hard, I mean, sometimes you can say, yeah, I feel fluid sometimes and that's okay, but that's still not emptiness, So, so it's a chipping away, it's a skillful method to chip away at these two main things. Ordinary appearance of yourself. So this is what we need to really think about with tantric practice. What am I doing there? Chipping away at the ordinary appearance of myself and the ordinary grasping. So I'm just going to share a couple of things that Lama said about that as well in his book. It's a very good way of expressing it. So here, I'm just reading through them. What Lama's saying is, my screen, is your screen going out? Oh, 1 second. No, that's it. Sorry, my screen went dark there, but it's okay, it's back again. So what Lama's saying is, we hold on to, and we've heard this before, but it is true, we hold on to a limited view of ourselves. Right? And of who we are and who we become, and our self-image sometimes can be quite low, feeling hopeless, inadequate. So this is what is the antidote to that. Connecting with our deity qualities. We're enlightened qualities. They're innate, but we're trying to wake them up. So that's why Tantric is a very good antidote. So it's actually very good for Westerners because, generally as Westerners, of course we can say we've got pride and do sometimes, but often that's coming from quite a low sense of self, So trying to really identify and get a sense of courage and confidence that that's what we can become, So that's what we do when we're visualizing the deity, visualizing ourselves. It challenges, tantric practice challenges this low opinion that we have of ourselves. And seeing ourselves as sort of, Lama puts it in a very nice way, a transcendentally beautiful way, with a beautiful body, benefiting, you have visualizations in Tantra where you're sending out light rays and benefiting many beings and giving them love and joy and enlightening them. It's all very nice, So, and it chipping away at the concrete view we have of ourselves, concrete concepts, concrete ideas of who we think we are. The strong self in me, myself, and I. This is how I really am. And feeling like we can't go beyond that, So that's why actually, deity yoga is very good for us, especially when we get moments where we feel the presence of the deity in us, or we feel the presence of the deity out there. It does something to wake up the mind, I don't know why my computer's going in and out. It keeps. Are you getting a black? You're not getting that, yeah? I'm just getting this blackness that keeps coming. But I'm glad you're not getting it. So okay, sorry. However, what we need with this, is, as I said, to arise as the deity. Of course, we're not a solid, concrete deity. We need to arise out of some understanding of emptiness. Some understanding. So this is where we work with these two concepts. Ordinary appearances, so appearing ordinary, concrete, poor me, myself and I, this kind of however we appear to ourselves like right now. And then there's a sense to clinging on to that. This is, then this is, we hold on to that, So we don't just have the appearance in the mind of I. The appearance isn't so much the problem. I mean, of course, we overcome the appearance by, instead of placing on an I, like we are body and a mind, and I am Mary, and I am, I am Jana, and I am Debbie, and I am, whatever that is. We imagine we're the deity, and I am Tara. But Tara is a very luminous light body. It's nothing substantial. It's light, it's made of wisdom, it's blissed out, the body's made in the nature of bliss. So, we're not going to grasp at something that's translucent or transparent in the same way as we do when we feel like we're this solid concrete person. So this is what the meditation is. This is what we're familiarizing our mind with. Again, meditation, making our mind familiar, is being not ordinary, not grasping. Becoming familiar with being this light, like a light body deity, but that's in the nature of emptiness, in the nature of our ultimate wisdom, in the nature of our most subtle mind, our subtle being. So it's actually a very, very skillful psychology, to keep, and that's what Lama means by overthrowing the tyranny of ordinary appearance. And of course, in the early days, as I said, it's going to feel kind of a little bit artificial, for sure. But the more we study Tantra, practice Tantra in connection with the Lamrim, doing this chipping away, as I say, from the view of Sutra, from this angle, developing what we understand by renunciation, bodhicitta, getting a deeper experience of that from this angle, then we can wake up more from the other side, from the subtle side, from the tantric practice will work more. We're blending these two together. We need to do both. And as Lama says, that so the biggest obstacle in the way of our successful transformation is our belief in ordinary appearances. Like, we really feel like, I am this, I am that, this is me, you know. So again, this is why we need, as a backdrop, some understanding of emptiness, to at least understand from the sutra point of view how I appear to myself right now is not correct. Right? We need to get a little bit conviction in the wisdom teachings and emptiness, you know, an interest in that, a mind that wants to go beyond our kind of ignorant, mistaken view of self, you know, because if we just plant the deity on us and say, I'm a light body, it's not like that, you know, that's not going to work, you know. So we do need to combine it with that, you know, with the understanding of emptiness, because basically the other name we call deity yoga is emptiness yoga. You know, emptiness, unifying ourselves with the emptiness, the empty nature of the deity. The empty our ultimate, our nature is empty, you know, our most subtle wind, our most subtle mind, that's its nature, emptiness. You know, we just haven't been able to recognize that yet right now. You know, we awaken that up enough in our lives to be able to recognize it at the death time. So with tantric practice, we're trying to get more and more and more subtle, more and more deep into that, these subtle consciousness, so we become familiar with them, with their nature, their essentially pure nature. So that when we, you know, when we pass at the death time, that's like we go back home there, you know. We're so familiar with that. Familiar with our consciousness arising as Tara, our consciousness arising as Medicine Buddha, or whatever our yidam or deity is, you know. We have some ability to bring that to mind, maybe at the death time, you know. Or at least we know that fundamentally we're pure, and that's where we go back at the death time. We go back to our most subtle consciousness. So we're not so afraid at the death time, because we're more familiar with that than we are. We've gained such a familiarity with that, and we've kind of let go of the grasping at our ordinary view of self. We're slowly letting go of that, slowly chipping away at that aspect, you know, with a background of some understanding of emptiness, you know. So in another term, you know, renunciation in another way, you know, it's clearly seeing who we think we are now, our self-imposed created limitations, and gaining the determination to be free from that. That's just another, I just put that in my notes, you know. And that's why, why Tantra is very powerful, because it's like continually, you know, chipping away at who we think we are, by arising as a deity, by visualizing the deity in front of us, before us, bringing the qualities of the deity when it's dissolutions, you know, bringing that into our being and thinking, this is really me, you know, I am one with this deity. And of course, when we do retreats, 100,000, 200,000 mantras, there's no question when you do those retreats, you get experiences of that. Yeah, you get, they might not be stable, but we get experiences of, you know, momentarily feeling like, wow, I feel really close to the qualities of Tara at that time. Medicine Buddha, Chenrezig, or our Yidam, you know, like something really wakes up, you know, through the power of the mantras, the retreat context. Or if we do these practices daily, there's no question we start to feel. And I think you definitely just start to feel better about yourself when you have a tantric practice. It's just what it does, you know, it makes you feel a bit happier. I know the group, you know, in Pamtingpa, every time we do like tantric retreat or pujas, everybody feels a bit happier, yeah? Because it's waking up those subtle consciousnesses, you know, that capacity. I mean, basically, we're trying to become more happy, not unhappy, more and more happy. The nature of our consciousness is pure happiness, pure joy, pure bliss. That's what the deity is, pure bliss, pure non-stop happiness. But not like the happiness we know. It's like a deep-rooted bliss, joy, and happiness, you know, that it's pure happiness. It doesn't change depending on outer conditions. It's not dependent on any other outer conditions. So the more we think about the quality of what that enlightened consciousness is, we have to think about that a lot, because that's what inspires us to get there, you know. Think about, you know, who we want to become, what that's going to look like. All right, well, we're on time. It's already 7:30. What was the next one? Okay, so we're going to move into that. Oh no, that's not the right one. Where are we? Anyway, next week, I don't know how I clicked on that, but we're almost done now. So just to finish, any last question? I've been doing a lot of talking. Is it making some... Hi, Morgan. Nice to see you this week. Is it making some sense? Some light bulbs going off or not going off? I mean, you're not going to say, no, that doesn't make any sense. That's a silly question, really, for me to ask. You need to nod and say it makes sense. But anyway, I hope you got something out of that. Something maybe inspirational to keep going with your tantric practice, or maybe to start and engage more. You know, for a couple of us who are new this evening, you know, maybe just keep checking out Tantra, whether you come back to this class or another class. I encourage you to maybe join some meditations. So here at Tupten Norbeling, this is an example, but there's many opportunities to join meditations that include, you know, doing a tantric practice, something very preliminary. Tupten Norbeling, I'm running a series of Tara meditations this week and next week. They're a bit of an unusual time. It's the middle of the day. A couple of the Marys have been coming. Kim, I think, did you come to one? I can't remember, maybe Monday. But yeah, if you're interested to just... Kim?
No, I didn't yet.
I think I saw you at this, something else, the FPMT prayers, yeah. So anyway, if you're, I do encourage you to try out tantric practice. Some of you might have already. You can do without initiation. Just getting a feeling in mantras, a little bit of visualization, how that feels. How does that, you know, uplift your mind? They can be very uplifting in the beginning, you know, and really supportive of when we're hearing sutra teachings. You know, it can, as I say, it supports and benefits both. All right, I'm going to share the dedications for this week here. Yeah, here we go. Oh, no, I don't have the I thought I had the dedication prayer here, but I'm not seeing it. Let's just take a moment then. Sorry, I didn't pull up the dedication prayer. So we're just going to take a moment. I think most of us have an idea how to dedicate, just sealing the merits. And before we do that, just taking a moment to think about is there something we heard here, at least one or two things that we can take away with us and maybe contemplate a little bit more this evening, tomorrow, this week, to inspire or deepen our practice, our understanding, Tantra, the Dharma. Just taking away maybe one or two things with us. And then dedicating, due to these merits, may all beings quickly achieve the state of a Buddha, become fully awake, and lead all others to that enlightened state. That's a dedication we usually do, so just holding that for a moment. Dedicate and sealing the merits towards our and others' full awakening. And especially, may the precious mind of bodhicitta, you know, this mind that has incredible skill and benefit to benefit many beings, and is embodied in our teachers, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, His Holiness and Dalai Lama, you know, any of our other gurus, you know, who we really feel benefit our minds, you know, embody this quality of bodhicitta. May that which they have, may that precious mind not yet born arise, and may that which has arisen in my mind not decline, but increase more and more in the hearts of me and all sentient beings. And we can dedicate for the long lives of our gurus, especially His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Maybe he live to at least 113, as he's promising, or at least making some commitment to do. May that happen. And may Lama Zopa Rinpoche's swift incarnation, who's already here may grow, when he's recognised, have all the conditions, the education and teachers and resources to become a great master and guide all of us again in the path. Okay, thank you so much. Nice to see so many people from both centres and a few new faces. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Venerable
Hi,
Angie.
Life as Meaning.
Nice seeing
Hi,
everybody.
Laurel. Yeah, nice to see everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Enjoy the rest of your evening and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Your hair's got long, Morgan. Where are you now?
I have a